Hey everyone, and welcome to Quailcast, the podcast where we take a closer look at the fascinating world of quail, from their behavior and ecology to the science and stories behind their survival. I'm Emily, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a review. It helps us grow and bring you even more quail-tastic content. Today, we're exploring a truly unique article called The Colors of Quail Science by Fidel Hernandez. This piece isn't just about quail. It's about how we think about science itself. Hernandez challenges us to blend creativity and logic, intuition and analysis to unlock new ways of understanding these incredible birds. From the psychology of quail to the chaos of their populations, and even the language we use to describe them, this article is a game changer. So, whether you're a quail enthusiast, a science lover, or just curious about the natural world, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be taking a look at something that you might not think is all that deep. Quail science.
Quail science.
Yeah. But you sent us this paper, and when I first saw the title, I thought, oh, this is going to be, pretty straightforward.
Right.
But this paper gets into some really unexpected areas like psychology, chaos theory, even a little bit of philosophy.
Yeah, it's really looking at quail science through a completely different lens. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about this paper is that it was presented at a retirement symposium for another quail scientist.
Oh, wow.
And the author talks about how that kind of setting actually really encourages what they call dual thinking, this idea of sort of like blending your intuition with logical reasoning.
Dual thinking. So like using both sides of the brain.
Exactly.
That makes sense. If you're at a gathering like that, you're probably going to be a little bit more open to some out-of-the-box ideas.
Yeah.
And this paper definitely has those.
It does.
So let's jump into the first essay, which gets into what the author calls the psychology of quail.
Okay.
Now, this might come as a surprise to some people, but quail behavior may be influenced by more than just pure instinct.
Yeah, and the author kind of starts off by saying that the appearance of a quail's environment could actually be providing these psychological cues that affect their breeding behavior.
Really?
Yeah, and it's all tied into this concept of Umwelt, which is essentially the idea that each species actually experiences the world in a unique way.
So like what a quail sees and how it interprets its surroundings could be totally different from how we experience the same environment as humans.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like how my dog thinks every crumb that falls on the floor is like a gourmet meal, even if I can barely see it.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, the author actually draws some parallels with human psychology, and they talk about how there's all this research out there showing how natural settings impact our well-being. So there are studies showing that hospital patients who have a view of nature actually recover faster.
Oh, wow.
Or that employees who have a view of greenery outside their window report higher job satisfaction.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that just looking at a tree could actually help you heal faster.
Yeah.
So if that kind of stuff's true for us, I mean, imagine how much stronger those effects might be for animals like quail that are just constantly immersed in their environment.
Right. And it's kind of a perfect segue into, one of the biggest mysteries in quail science, which is those boom and bust reproductive cycles that we see.
Yeah, especially in those semi-arid environments where they're really common.
Exactly. And, the author throws out this really fascinating idea, which is what if the landscape itself is sending signals that are affecting quail breeding?
Okay, so you're saying like a lush green landscape is kind of like a go forth and multiply sign for quail.
Yeah.
And then when things get brown and dry, it's more like a hold your horses warning.
That's the gist of it.
Wow. I mean, it sounds kind of poetic, but is there actual science behind this?
Well, yeah. There have actually been studies showing that rainfall can lead to higher levels of reproductive hormones in some bird species. And for other birds, it seems like green vegetation is actually a trigger for nesting behavior.
Wow. I mean, if just a change in scenery can influence something as basic as reproduction, what other subtle cues are we missing?
Right.
It really makes you wonder.
It does. And it's a great reminder of just how much we still have to learn about, how animals interact with their environment.
Absolutely.
And that kind of leads us perfectly into the next essay, which is all about this really mind-bending concept called chaos theory.
Chaos theory. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds a little intimidating, but I have a feeling you're going to make it surprisingly relatable.
I think so.
All right, ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So, sometimes the most complex ideas have these really surprisingly simple origins.
Okay.
Like chaos theory.
Okay.
It all started back in the 1960s with this meteorologist named Edward Lorenz.
Okay.
He was running these weather simulations on his computer, and just totally by chance, he discovered something incredible. These tiny, almost imperceptible changes in the starting conditions could lead to dramatically different weather patterns down the line.
Wow.
And that's what we now call sensitive dependence on initial conditions, or as it's more commonly known, the butterfly effect.
Wait, so you're saying something as small as a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could eventually cause like a tornado in Texas?
Well, it's not quite that literal, but, the principle holds true. In these chaotic systems, even the smallest changes can have huge and unpredictable consequences. And that got scientists thinking, what if chaos theory could explain those wild population swings we see in nature?
Okay.
I mean, we were just talking about how quail populations can just boom and bust seemingly at random.
Right.
So what if there's some kind of underlying order to that chaos?
Okay, so you're saying those seemingly random fluctuations might actually be part of a larger predictable pattern.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah. It's definitely a mind bender. So let's take it back to the 1970s with this guy, Robert May.
Okay.
He was studying population growth models. These are basically mathematical equations that try to predict how populations will change over time.
Right.
And May found that even a really simple model with just a few parameters could generate all sorts of different outcomes depending on the growth rate.
So you mean like a small tweak to the growth rate could make the model go from stable and predictable to completely chaotic?
Exactly. And that was a groundbreaking discovery because it showed that even these simple systems can exhibit this incredibly complex behavior.
Wow.
And guess what?
What?
Quail, with their high reproductive potential and their sensitivity to environmental changes, they fit the bill for potential chaotic dynamics.
Now you really got my attention.
Oh.
So does the paper actually connect this chaos theory to real-world quail populations?
It does.
Okay.
The author highlights several research studies that actually explore this very question. One study was looking at a computer model of a quail population, and they found that these populations could experience those boom and bust cycles even when the death rate stayed constant.
Wow.
And then another study, they looked at a long-term quail research project, and they basically concluded that while their model could produce chaos, the actual population fluctuations they saw were probably due to random events. So the jury is still out on whether quail populations are truly chaotic.
Right. Okay. Well, I have to ask, if chaos is a natural part of the system, doesn't that mean it's actually a good thing?
That's a great question, and it's something that the author brings up in the paper.
Okay.
Think about it this way. A healthy heart doesn't beat in this perfectly regular rhythm.
Right.
There's a little bit of variability, a little bit of chaos,
Yeah.
and that's actually what allows it to adapt to changing conditions. So could the same be true for quail populations?
Okay.
Could those unpredictable swings actually make them more resilient in the long run?
Yeah, I like where you're going with this. It's like saying a little bit of chaos is nature's way of keeping things adaptable.
Exactly, and it makes you wonder if all our attempts to control or manage those fluctuations, if they're actually counterproductive.
Right.
I mean, think about all the effort that goes into, stabilizing quail populations, creating that perfect habitat, controlling predators.
Right.
What if by doing all that, we're actually making them less able to cope with unexpected changes?
It's like we're almost questioning the very foundations of how we approach conservation.
Right. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the beauty of, exploring these unconventional ideas. It forces us to challenge our assumptions.
Yeah.
Look at things in a new way.
For sure.
And speaking of challenging assumptions, the last essay in this paper tackles this concept that's, particularly relevant to conservation.
Okay.
Tipping points.
Okay. Tipping points. I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I really fully grasp it. It's like a point of no return.
It can be, but it's not always negative.
Okay.
So to kind of explain tipping points, the author takes us back to 1980s New York City.
Okay.
Which at the time was dealing with this massive crime wave. And then seemingly out of nowhere, crime rates just started plummeting. It wasn't this gradual decline. It was a sudden, dramatic shift, a tipping point.
Wow. A sudden drop in crime in New York City. I mean, that definitely sounds like a positive tipping point. So what triggered that shift?
Well, that's the interesting part. It wasn't like one big change. It was a series of smaller changes that all kind of came together and reached this critical threshold and tipped the system into this new state. They started cracking down on these minor offenses like graffiti and fare evasion.
So by addressing those smaller problems, they created this ripple effect that eventually led to a major reduction in crime.
That's the idea.
Wow.
Small changes, strategically applied, can have a big impact.
So it makes you wonder, are there similar tipping points when we're talking about ecological systems?
Yeah, and that's exactly where the author takes us next. Looking at the decline of bobwhite quail in the southern Great Plains.
Okay.
And this has been a real head-scratcher for biologists because, you see, in some areas, there seems to be plenty of suitable habitat.
Right.
Yet, the quail populations are still going down.
Yeah.
And so disease has been tossed around as one possible explanation.
Right.
But the author here is putting forward a different idea: habitat loss.
Okay, but you just said there's still suitable habitat in some areas. So how could habitat loss be the main problem here?
Well, it all goes back to tipping points. You see, the author's suggesting that even if it's gradual, habitat loss over time could push the quail population past some critical threshold.
Yeah.
And then that's when you get this rapid decline that we're seeing. Think of it like a bathtub. You can keep draining a little bit of water at a time, and it seems like everything's fine. But then all of a sudden, whoosh, it hits the drain and all the water goes down the pipe.
Okay, yeah, that's a great analogy. I get it now. So you're saying that even if things look okay on the surface,
Yeah.
underneath those subtle changes could be pushing the ecosystem closer and closer to the edge until it suddenly collapses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to kind of illustrate this even further, the author brings in some interesting research looking at the relationship between the area of habitat and how well populations can actually persist.
Oh, wait.
And, we often assume that this is just a simple linear relationship.
Right. Less habitat, fewer quail.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
But the research suggests it's a lot more complicated than that.
So it's not that one-to-one correlation. So what does the research say?
Well, the research suggests that there's something called an extinction threshold.
An extinction threshold.
Yeah. It's essentially this point where even a small amount of habitat loss can have like a really big impact on a population's chance of survival. It's that classic last straw that breaks the camel's back.
Right.
And here's another interesting thing: habitat fragmentation. Breaking those larger habitats into smaller, more isolated patches,
Yeah.
that can make this whole thing even worse.
Yeah. That makes sense. Because if the habitat's all broken up, it's harder for the quail to find food, mates, all the things they need.
Right, exactly.
So could this extinction threshold, along with habitat fragmentation, be playing a role in what's happening with the quail in the southern Great Plains?
Well, there's definitely a possibility. And we have to remember that this region has experienced significant habitat loss and fragmentation, mainly due to agricultural conversion and just, development in general.
Right.
And so the author's suggesting that it's possible we might have unknowingly crossed that extinction threshold for quail.
And that's what's leading to the decline we're seeing now.
Yeah.
It's almost like this delayed reaction,
Yeah.
All those gradual changes over time, and then boom, the population crashes. It's kind of a sobering thought.
It is. And the author actually ties this back to some pretty heavy hitters from 19th century philosophy.
Yeah.
Guys like Hegel, Marx, and Engels.
Okay, those are some big names.
Yeah, they had this concept called the transformation of quantity into quality. Essentially what it means is that small, gradual changes can eventually lead to a really big shift in a system.
So those seemingly insignificant things, converting a little bit of grassland here or clearing out some brush there, over time they add up to something much bigger than we might initially realize.
Right, exactly.
Wow. It really makes you think about the long-term consequences of our actions,
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about how to manage and conserve species like quail.
Absolutely. And it kind of circles back to that idea from earlier about how our vocabulary, or maybe a limited vocabulary, can affect how we perceive things. Could it be that our traditional approaches to quail science, to conservation, are they too narrow? Are we missing something crucial because we haven't been asking the right questions or looking at the problem from a broader perspective?
It's a great question, and the author of the paper definitely seems to think so. And to make his point, he actually brings up that really cool Radiolab episode, the one about the Himba tribe and color perception.
Oh, yeah. That's the one where the Himba tribe doesn't have a specific word for blue.
Right.
And because of that, they actually have a hard time distinguishing between blue and green. It's crazy how language can shape how we actually see the world.
It's amazing, right? And the author makes this really clever connection to quail science.
Okay.
He's basically suggesting that the way we talk about quail, the research questions we ask, the methods we use, it's all shaped by our current understanding, by our current vocabulary.
But what if that vocabulary is holding us back? What if there are all these critical insights that we're just completely missing because we haven't really broadened our language, our thinking, when it comes to quail?
It's almost like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but we're only using a few of the pieces.
Right.
So what's the solution?
Well, I think the author is urging us to embrace new perspectives.
Okay.
New ideas, even if they seem a little out there, even if they challenge how we think about things.
Right.
And to be willing to take ideas from other fields,
Okay.
like psychology, chaos theory, even philosophy,
Right.
and apply those to quail science.
Yeah. It's like a call to action, for a new generation of researchers and conservationists to think outside the box and come up with these new and innovative approaches.
Absolutely. We need to ask those hard questions.
Okay.
Like, how much habitat is really enough for quail to thrive? How do we make our conservation efforts more adaptable, more resilient in the face of all this change that's happening? And how do we make sure that what we do today doesn't lead to those negative tipping points down the road?
That's a lot to think about. Well, I have to say, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to just how complex, how fascinating quail science really is. We went from the psychology of perception to chaos theory. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great reminder that there's always more to learn, even about something as seemingly simple as quail. And that maybe those biggest breakthroughs come when we step outside our comfort zones and really embrace those unconventional ideas.
I agree.
Well, on that note, I want to leave everyone with a challenge.
Okay.
What's your contribution going to be to the language of quail science? What new questions are you going to ask? What connections are you going to make? And remember, even those smallest actions, they can have huge ripple effects. So thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery, and be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the research and resources we talked about today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And that wraps up today's episode of Quailcast. We hope it sparked some thought and left you feeling inspired. To explore more, check out quailcast.com, where you can access show details, bonus material, and everything else we've got going on. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. It's the best way to ensure you're always in the know about upcoming episodes. A big thank you to everyone who listens and supports us. See you next time, when we'll continue exploring ideas together. Keep dreaming, keep discovering, and keep flying with Quailcast.